Hello, and welcome to the Biological Resources Information Program for the Tamarisk Avenue Improvements Project. This training has 4 broad objectives. Hopefully, by the end of this presentation, you'll be familiar with all 4 of these points. First, we're going to cover the definition and implications of take. Then we'll move on to what your responsibilities are if you encounter a regulated species. We'll have a brief introduction to the protected species associated with this project, and then we'll go over some general mitigation measures that need to be followed in order to prevent any incidents of take. We'd like to emphasize that this training is meant to supplement, not replace the training information handouts that you should have received before watching this video. If you have not received a training pamphlet or booklet, please request one from your supervisor or on-site alluvian biologist. Let's start by discussing take. Take is a broadly defined term. Under the Federal Endangered Species Act, take means to harass, harm, pursue, hunt, shoot, wound, kill, trap, capture, or collect, or to attempt to engage in any such conduct. Penalties for take will vary from species to species. However, any individual found to be committing unsanctioned take may be dealt hefty fines and in some cases up to a year in jail time. These penalties are assessed for each instance of unsanctioned take. There are additional regulations and penalties that also pertain to the take of a protected species, including the Migratory Bird Treaty Act and the California Fish and Game Code sections 3503, 3503.5, and 3513. Again, penalties for violating these regulations includes fines and/or jail time. So what should you do if you encounter a regulated species on the project? The very first thing you should do is ensure that you do not touch or approach the animal. You should then immediately suspend work within the area the animal was found, especially if this work would result in take. Your next step is to notify your supervisor or the on-site biologist. If a biologist is not on site, please contact Gennaro Lockhart at the number listed on the slide and in your training materials. Unless otherwise noted in your training materials, a 100-foot no-work buffer will need to be established around the species of concern until it either moves off the project site of its own volition or until permission is received from regulatory agencies to reduce or eliminate the no-work buffer. The next couple slides will give you a brief overview of all the listed species and regulated species that occur on this project site. The burrowing owl is a small brown mottled owl standing 7 to 9 inches in height. True to its name, the burrowing owl nests in a hole in the ground. Although it is quite willing to dig its own burrow, it often uses one already provided by prairie dogs, skunks, ground squirrels, or tortoises. Burrowing owls require habitat with 3 basic attributes: open, well-drained terrain, short, sparse vegetation, and underground burrows. During the breeding season, they may also need enough permanent cover and taller vegetation within their foraging range to provide them with sufficient prey. Burrowing owls occupy grasslands, deserts, sagebrush scrub, agricultural areas including pastures and untilled margins of cropland, earthen levees and berms, coastal uplands, and urban vacant lawns, as well as the margins of airports, golf courses, and roads. Breeding in California can start as early as January and continues through September. The peak for breeding is April. Burrowing owls can lay 1 to 11 eggs. The young hatch in about 30 days and fledge at 44 days. They will remain at the burrow for some time, foraging at night with the adults. In Northern California, owls migrate south during September and October. A variety of bird species have been found nesting in or immediately adjacent to Caltrans right-of-ways. Nest sites are often placed in crevices, cavities, seams, or weep holes within bridges. Other nests are constructed in open vertical cement surfaces on bridges. The species that utilize man-made structures as nest sites tend to be more tolerant of urban conditions, but can nonetheless be sufficiently disturbed during construction or maintenance activities to cause nest abandonment or inattentiveness, resulting in the death or loss of eggs or juveniles. Incubation and brood rearing require approximately 4 to 5 weeks for smaller birds, but can take up to 12 weeks for larger birds. Now, we'll go over some additional key species protection measures for this project. These slides won't comprise an exhaustive list of necessary protective measures, but they should provide you with a good idea of what's expected. Please refer to your training booklet for a comprehensive list of species protection measures. There are several general protective measures that need to be followed on this project. I'll go over these quickly, but you should review these measures in your training materials. First of all wildlife should be allowed to pass through the project footprint unharmed. This includes any animals that don't carry state or federal protections. Additionally, all litter, construction debris, and food-related waste generated on the site needs to be contained in sealed trash containers and removed from the construction area daily. These containers need to be removed from the site daily. Containing food waste is especially important as these items tend to attract wildlife, which could ultimately cause project delays. During construction operations, stockpiling of construction materials, portable equipment, vehicles, and supplies need to be restricted to the designated construction staging areas. The same goes for access roads into and out of the work area. Finally, minimize dust formation and restrict the disturbance of vegetation outside the work area. If we find any active nests or burrows for any regulated species mentioned in the previous slides, we'll need to set up a protective no-work buffer around it until it can be demonstrated that the chicks have fledged and the site is no longer active. Depending on the species, different radii will apply. Burrowing owl nests require a 600-foot buffer. Raptors will require a 500-foot buffer, while all other nesting birds will require a 250-foot buffer. We'll finish up here with some important takeaways from this presentation. Perhaps the most important takeaway is remembering what your responsibilities are if you see a regulated species within the project site. Don't touch or approach regulated wildlife and immediately report encounters to your supervisor or the on-site biologist. Keep your training materials somewhere you can readily access them. If an animal wanders onto the construction site and you're unsure whether it's cause for concern, your booklets contain the necessary contact information and procedures to follow in order to protect yourself and your company. It's important to remember that you and your company are wholly responsible for the following measures in this training video and its associated training materials, as well as the permits and specifications for this project. So please revisit this video and your training materials as needed. This concludes the Biological Resources Information Training video. Thank you for your time. If you have any questions about what's been covered in this presentation or your training materials, please direct them to your on-site alluvian biologist.